Audi's A7 Sportback moves to the next level in second generation guise. Buyers in the full executive segment get Gran Turismo body styling as before for a more individual demeanour, but the smarter package on offer has been thoroughly rejuvenated with mild hybrid engine technology, class-leading possibilities for driving autonomy, sophisticated media connectivity and cutting-edge cabin design. The result is a high-tech combination of style and practicality.
Buying a full-sized executive car is no longer as straightforward as it used to be. Large SUVs now compete with conventional saloons and estates to tempt buyers in this segment, as do more dynamic and individual 4- or 5-door coupe-style Gran Turismo class designs. Like this one, Audi's smartly suited and uber-sophisticated second-generation A7 Sportback, launched here in early 2018. The first time around, this model was merely a swoopier, more fashionable 5-door take on Audi's A6. This time, though, it's arguably got more in common with the brand's larger boardroom-level A8 luxury saloon. There's a different demeanour here, of course, to the sense of prestige that characterises Ingolstadt's bigger model. In an A7, it's all about pure progressiveness, apparently, but the technology is pretty much the same, both inside and under the bonnet. And there's quite a lot of it, which is just as well, because competition in this profitable little niche has ramped up quite a lot in recent times, since the launch of two direct rivals, BMW 6 Series Gran Turismo and the third-generation version of the model that pioneered this segment, the Mercedes CLS. But there's nothing quite like this A7, and for the time being anyway, also nothing quite like the so-called Level 3 autonomous driving tech it can potentially offer, which theoretically allows the driver not only to relinquish control at certain speeds, but actually to engage in other tasks unconnected with driving. And that's just the start. The petrol and diesel engines used here have become much more efficient thanks to MHEV, mild hybrid electrification, and the new era cabin is now completely touchscreen orientated. In addition, the sleek exterior styling introduces a fresh design language for the brand, and it clothes a completely new and much stiffer aluminium-intensive MLB Evo body structure. Plus, options include four-wheel steering and an astonishingly sophisticated active air suspension system. In short, it's all very Vorsprung durch Technik. Now, it's great in an A8, but will it work in a segment where buyers want their cars to be more tactile and charismatic? Let's find out. Set off, and initially the sport element of this Sportback model's driving demeanour can seem a little remote if you're driving quite lazily. Up your game though, and this A7 responds. The new stiffer MLB Evo platform that's done so much for this model's Porsche Panamera GT cousin also makes a big difference here, combining with the supple multi-link suspension system to deliver a composed ride and cornering ability more agile than you might expect such a large car to be able to deliver. There's even more important news beneath the bonnet, well, at least in the middle of the lineup anyway. If you're looking at options lower down the range, then you can talk to your dealer about a 4-cylinder 2-litre TDI derivative and a lower-powered TDI V6 variant. At the top of the lineup, the brand has developed super quick S7 and RS7 sporting derivatives. Our focus here, though, is going to be on the two mainstream engines that this second-generation model was launched with. Now, both are 3 litres in size, designated either 55 in TFSI petrol form or 50 in TDI diesel guise. Those unfamiliar figures coming courtesy of Audi's complicated new naming convention that sees the two initial numerals representing different power output bands. Now, both power plants are evolutions of existing units, but they come enhanced by the addition of the clever 48-volt electrical system that was first introduced in the brand's SQ7 SUV. This improves torque, power and throttle response, but it's chiefly there to boost efficiency at cruising speeds, where the car can coast with the engine switched off, and in traffic, where the MHEV setup gives extended stop-start intervals. Now, thanks to the current legislative disapproval of diesel power, the A7 Sportback 55 TFSI petrol variant is likely to enjoy a slightly higher take-up than it might have done in times past. It offers 340 PS, and that's good enough to get you to 62 in 5.3 seconds, en route to a maximum that, as usual on big Audis, has to somewhat pointlessly be limited to 155 miles an hour. Most buyers, though, are still going to want to opt for the 3-litre diesel model, the 50 TDI derivative, and that's what we're trying here. And they're reassured that the lower 286 PS power output will be more than compensated for by a larger helping of torque. There's 620 newton meters of it. Sure enough, that's sufficient to hurl you to 62 mph in just 5.7 seconds, which you might think was quite something from a 5-metre long 5-door executive GT able to return nearly 50 miles per gallon in regular use. That's until you find that obvious rivals like the Mercedes CLS and the BMW 6 Series Gran Turismo can manage that too. Both those competitors copy Audi by offering buyers 4-wheel drive, but Ingolstadt contends that its improved Quattro system is more sophisticated than the rival 4MATIC and X-Drive setups. The Quattro package that features on every A7 pushes 60% of power to the rear and 40% to the front during normal driving, but if grip's lost at either end, then the majority of power instantly goes to the other axle. Now, another piece of technology that is copied elsewhere in this segment, by BMW incidentally, is this Audi's party piece embellishment to Quattro 4-wheel drive, and that's the optional dynamic all-wheel steering package. As usual with such technology, the idea is to improve high-speed cornering stability by making the rear wheels slightly turn in the same direction as those at the front, and also to improve low-speed maneuverability by, in that situation, getting them to turn in the opposite direction to those at the front. It's the parking speed enhancement that you'll probably notice first. It reduces the turning circle significantly, and that makes parking much easier. As ever with Audi models, there's a standard Drive Select driving mode system that works through the usual comfort, efficiency, dynamic and auto settings, and those alter a range of driving parameters, including throttle response and steering feel. Now, that setup also tweaks the gear shift times of the standard auto transmission. Now, there's a 7-speed S-Tronic box in the 55 TFSI petrol model and a tougher 8-speed Tiptronic unit to deal with the greater torque of the 50 TDI model's diesel power plant. The Drive Select system can also alter suspension settings if, as we suggest, you upgrade from the passive springing that comes fitted as standard. Now, we think that you're really going to want to do this if you're going to upgrade from the base Sportback that we're trying here to smarter S-Line trim. That's because the pricier S-Line package comes fitted with a stiffer passive suspension setup, lowered by 10mm. That's a combination likely to leave this car with ride quality that many executive buyers will think is rather over firm. A better option, we think, is to stick with entry-level sport trim and spend some of the extra cash instead on one of the two optional adjustable suspension packages. Now, there are two: suspension with damping control, which electronically alters the shock absorber settings based on your choice of Drive Select mode. Ideally, though, it'd be better to stretch to the more sophisticated adaptive air suspension setup that's borrowed from the A8, and that really suits this car perfectly. Now, this also works through Drive Select, but it more continuously adjusts the damping at all 4 wheels, and it provides self-leveling suspension with automatically regulating ride height. An air-suspended A7 flows comfortably over potholes and speed humps, but it's also able to keep chassis movement in check through turns at higher speeds without channel ferry levels of body roll. There's a lift mode for rough roads or ramps, and at over 74 miles an hour, the suspension automatically lowers itself to improve the aerodynamics. So let's say that you've got the spec of this A7 right. Just how much of a GT really is it? Well, earlier we remarked on the way that this car's agility is quite impressive given its size, and that's a reference to the way that this second generation model feels a more responsive partner than its rather dreary predecessor. That's especially if you happen to have the 4-wheel steering system fitted. You sense quite quickly that it's easier to push along through the bends than was the case with the previous car, but that isn't to suggest that this Sportback is in conventional terms rewarding to drive. We're just saying that, well, that a big improvement's been made, and that by class standards, should the need occur for you to push things along, then this Audi will do a better job than you might expect in trying to respond. The limiting factor here is steering feedback. Unfortunately, there's not a great deal of it, although the helm is certainly now more precise, and that's aided by a progressive setup that allows it to operate more and more directly as the turning angle increases. Standard wheel selective torque control further helps through the bends. Now this minimally brakes the two wheels on the inside of the corner before they can begin to spin. And there's the option of a sport differential, which at speed through tight turns can constantly vary the amount of torque that's distributed to each of the rear wheels. Now, someone likely to specify that is not the kind of buyer being targeted by autonomous driving options, which have been introduced with the A7 this time around. So let's take a look at those now. Like its fourth generation A8 stablemate, this Mark II model A7 Sportback has had the potential for so-called level 3 driving autonomy designed in, and that works via an optional traffic jam pilot setup. Now, this will allow the car to drive itself in an unsupervised fashion at speeds of up to 37 miles an hour, so long as you're on a highway with a physical barrier separating both directions of traffic. That's quite a step forward. Plus, Audi's also provided parking pilot and garage pilot systems that allow you to stand on the curb and remotely park your A7 using a smartphone app, and that'll enable it to perform far more complex maneuvers than anything that competitor systems can manage. All of that's impressive, and on the move in this Sportback, it all serves to further emphasise the feeling that you're really only scratching the surface of what this car's been designed to do. Now, that is very obviously the case in terms of the autonomous driving tech, but it also applies in other areas too. The drive dynamics in particular can, as we've said, be sometimes quite surprising, although throughout, the sheer weight and width of this Audi will never be very far from your mind. The exemplary refinement, though, that's much easier to appreciate, or at least it is at speed. Now, Audi says that this A7 is one of the quietest cars it's ever built, but it doesn't feel that way when you're standing next to an idling TDI variant. Out on the highway, though, the cabin easily reaches the whisper quiet standards required in this class, and that's just one of the many things which now allow you to pitch this car credibly against its toughest rivals. This is certainly a very imposing piece of design. Is it beautiful? Well, that depends on your definition and very possibly on the amount of money you have to spend on the finished spec. Either way, you'll certainly get yourself a very sizable piece of sculpted executive segment German real estate. This second generation A7 Sportback being nearly 5 meters long and almost 2 meters wide, yet standing only 1.4 meters high. Classically elegant? Well, maybe not, but it's certainly handsome and sophisticated. The Gran Turismo style profile perspective remains much as before, with athletically taut surfaces, a long bonnet and that low roofline tapering sharply towards the rear. Now, this sharp shoulder line is there to try to lower the optical centre of gravity, extending back from the headlight and then reappearing above the rear door handle, where it's used to fashion the powerfully muscled section above the wheel arch. Now, as part of this, you get this third D-pillar side window that tapers upwards in a style apparently referencing Audi's 100 Coupe S model of 1970. No, we don't remember that car either. Anyway, further down, this upwardly angled lower belt rail line gives the flank some shape, and it separates arches housing wheels of between 19 and 21 inches in size. We've got the 19-inch 10 Y-spoke rims here. The front is dominated by this wider, lower, single-frame black finished grille with outer angled corners that flow into crease lines that tilt upwards in a manner referencing the bow of a yacht. 4 sharp contours flow down the aluminium bonnet into this centrepiece, and that sits above 3 air inlets. This lower narrow slit flanked by honeycombed corner cutouts fashioned in a way that's supposed to suggest the splitters of a race-ready touring car. The slim LED headlights continue their menacing demeanour, and they can be optioned up to include Audi's more sophisticated matrix and laser light technology. Now, the brand's done its best to give the rear end a bit of a sense of zeitgeist too. Below this electrically retracting tailgate spoiler, an LED light band extends across its entire width and looks distinctive, particularly at night when it's putting on a light show as part of the locking process. Elegant chrome elements in the anthracite lower diffuser also aim to make the car look wider, but as ever with an expensive Audi, it's what's underneath all this tinsel that really ought to command your attention. The A7 structure lacks the high-tech magnesium and carbon fibre reinforced polymer elements of the larger A8 saloon, but it gains the latest stiff and sophisticated aluminium intensive MLB Evo platform that the Volkswagen Group currently uses for all its largest cars, including this one's cousin and theoretical rival, the second generation Porsche Panamera. Now let's pull back this frameless door and take a seat at the wheel, pausing on the way to notice that the handle is now operated by a micro switch that requires just 5mm of movement when you go to use it. This car's full of little touches like that. Now inside there's what Audi describes as a digital driving experiential space with a futuristic lounge atmosphere. Well, as you can tell from that, Vorsprung durch Technik even extends into the marketing rhetoric. Now, all the technology here is borrowed from that first seen on Audi's 4th generation A8 saloon, but in this case, it's presented with a slightly more dynamic focus, and that means a fractional angling of all the main control interfaces slightly more towards the driver. Now, you're going to need to like screens because this completely redesigned cabin incorporates no fewer than 3 of them. The 2 that you'll notice first power up as soon as the doors opened, and they dominate the upper and lower parts of this piano black trimmed centre stack. Now, we had reservations about this kind of layout when we first encountered it in the Range Rover Velar because of the slightly distracting way that it was sometimes necessary to look down at the lower screen when you were driving. Audi, however, has designed the whole setup better, firstly because the lower display deals only with climate control and comfort functions, and secondly because the whole setup works with haptic feedback, and that sees the touchscreen surface emit a tactile and acoustic signal when a function's pressed. As a result, once you get used to where everything is, you really shouldn't have to look away from the road in order to operate any given function. Now true, there isn't the elegant ambiance of a competing Mercedes CLS or the purposeful design purity of a rival BMW 6 Series GT, but as with the exterior, that's somehow appropriate. This Audi ought to offer something different and more technological, provided that also incorporates the required splash of luxury needed for a car of this status. Now, the designers have tried to deliver some of that, courtesy of this aluminium framed central fascia panel that curves around the upper MMI screen, but unless you take up the extra cost option of trimming this area in fine grain ash, it's all a little overshadowed by the overriding emphasis on high gloss black surfacing. The optional extended LED interior lighting pack helps things a bit with colour configurable LED strip lighting right around the cabin, so in the roof, in the armrests, around the seats, even in the door pockets. And another thing that you could add to give this cabin's sophisticated but slightly clinical atmosphere a little more visual appeal is the optional full leather pack, and that coats the upper instrument panel, the door shoulders, the armrests and the centre console with lovely stitched Napa leather. A slightly lower quality of hide-up holsters of seats, which nevertheless offer supreme comfort, being powered, heated and fashioned from a variety of carefully shaped flexible foam layers. Not quite so enamoured of the design of this 3-spoke wheel that they position you perfectly in front of, but there's very little to fault about the instrument binnacle that you view through it, which as standard features an improved version of the configurable Audi virtual cockpit screen that we're now used to seeing in the brand's smaller models. This 12.3-inch TFT digital monitor works as usual with 2 selectable layouts. There's a classical view that prioritises a couple of prominent dials and an infotainment mode which shrinks that pair of gauges to allow more central space for various data readouts or a full width navigation map. All of this works, of course, in concert with the two centre stack screens that we mentioned at the beginning. The gently curved upper 10.1-inch display blending almost invisibly into the surrounding high gloss black trim and operable by touch, voice or steering wheel controls. It deals with the most important radio, media and telephone functions, plus the far more sophisticated intelligent 3D navigation system that's been developed for this second generation model. As you'd expect, there's the usual Audi smartphone interface that's compatible with the Apple CarPlay and Android Auto systems. And of course, you get a full suite of Audi Connect media connectivity features. Now, amongst other things, that delivers online media streaming, a Google Points of Interest search function, a comprehensive Audi online traffic information system, plus news and weather feeds via a Wi-Fi hotspot. And that supports the new superfast LTE advanced mobile data network. As we said, the lower monitor, which is 8.6 inches in size, is reserved for more comfort-orientated features, although its screen can also be used to trace letters that the MMI search system can then use to give you selection options. Of course, you might expect that to be just another thing that would leave these lovely shiny displays continually coated in grubby fingerprints, and you might also worry about sunlight reflection. Now, Audi has tried with partial success to mitigate both of these issues by use of an anti-fingerprint coating and a layer of anti-glare film, but to some extent both problems do still remain. Onto storage space. Now the main receptacle for this is a lidded area between the seats that also incorporates the standard Audi phone box system's wireless charging mat, along with SIM and SD card ports and a couple of USB points. It is rather a shallow area though, plus the door pockets are disappointingly small too, and there is no overhead compartment for your sunglasses. Still, there is a lidded compartment here next to the gear stick, and that gives you twin cup holders and a 12-volt socket. There's also a pull-out compartment down here by the driver's knee, and there's a decently sized glove box which is refreshingly unencumbered by media equipment. Right, let's take a seat in the rear where there's another wide opening frameless door. Now, though this second generation design is slightly shorter and narrower than its predecessor, Audi promises us more space here. So let's see. Now, early versions of the previous generation A7 and all the more sporting variants of that car irritatingly restricted you to just a couple of seating positions back here. Now, that may fit with the whole Gran Turismo concept, but it's just annoying on those occasions when you have an extra child to pick up from school on your way home from work, or an extra adult to take back from the pub. Now, this Mark II Senior Sportback model offered up 3 seat belts right from the start of production, but you're not going to want to use the centre berth unless you absolutely have to, because it's so heavily impeded by this over-prominent centre transmission tunnel. Still, provided you focus on the 2 main sculpted seats, you'll find that the 12mm increase in wheelbase length this time around is enough to make things feel quite a bit more spacious back here. Audi says there's 21mm more legroom and 5mm of extra headroom. It's still not as spacious as the rear bench you'll find in a rival BMW 6 Series GT, but it's about on a par with the strongest selling Mercedes CLS. A fold-down centre armrest includes a useful compartment, but you don't get these twin cup holders or the central 12-volt socket above the transmission tunnel unless you pay extra for the optional storage pack. This rear seat digital display is optional too. That's part of the 4-zone air conditioning system. These seat back nets are standard though. Now let's finish by taking a look out back. The hatch opens electrically to reveal a 535-litre space, and that's exactly the same as that offered by the previous generation version of this car. It's a rather shallow space. The trunk of this model's boxier BMW rival is deeper and much bigger, but it's obviously much more versatile than the saloon boot of the competing 4-door Mercedes CLS. Space beneath the boot floor is taken up by the spare wheel, but you do get a 12-volt socket, and with the optional storage pack, you get this floor area net. Now, apparently either 2 golf bags or up to 8 carry-on suitcases will fit in here. If you have longer items like skis to accommodate, the fact that the rear bench has a 40-20-40 split means you can push the centre section forward without disturbing 2 rear-seated passengers. If you need more room, then completely flattening the rear bench frees up 1,390 litres of capacity, which is, of course, where this A7 holds a massive advantage over that rival CLS model. The mainstream focus in the A7 lineup centres around the 2 3-litre V6 engines that were offered from launch, a 50 TDI 286 PS diesel derivative and the 50 TFSI 340 PS petrol version. Pricing as before pitches this senior Sportback just above the more conventional A6 but substantially below the sums required for the brand's similarly engineered A8 saloon. So, how much are we talking? Well, at the introduction of this Mark II A7 model, prices started from around £55,000, and that got you either of the 2 core V6 power plants in standard sport trim. More dynamic S-line spec will set you back £2,900 more. Whichever one you choose, your car will come with Quattro 4-wheel drive mated to 8-speed automatic transmission. Now here, we've gone for the 50 TDI Sport variant that arguably represents a sweet spot in the range. Now, like us, you'll probably find that badging unfamiliar. The 50 and 55 designations that most commonly used refer to the different levels of power band that have now been formulated within the Audi lineup. The 50 badge is used for models with 250 PS or more, with 55 designating variants with 340 PS or more. The brand also has a lower 40 designated power band, and that's for models developing between 170 and 250 PS. You can talk to your dealer about a couple of TDI diesel A7 variants, a lower powered V6 and a 2-litre 4-cylinder version that'll be wearing that badge. As with the first generation model, Audi has also developed top sporting V8 petrol powered S7 and RS7 models to complete the lineup. As for competitors, well, it's quite possible that potential customers for this car could be coming from all kinds of executive class, large SUVs, saloons or estates. But in terms of really direct rivals that also follow the coupe-style Gran Turismo concept, there are really only 2, the 4-door Mercedes CLS and the 5-door BMW 6 Series Gran Turismo. Now, the BMW costs much the same as this Audi if you get yourself a like-for-like comparison by kitting it out with xDrive 4-wheel drive, and it'll be much the same if your chosen benchmark is the Mercedes, which, like this A7, gets all-wheel traction as standard. To be more specific, the price of the CLS in 450 petrol form or 350D diesel guise falls midway between sport and S-line versions of this Audi. As for other less directly comparable options, well, if you don't care about badge equity and you want to save a bit, then the top V6 GTS version of Kia's Stinger delivers the GT concept for about £40,000, as arguably does the top Volkswagen Arteon. At the other extreme, if you have a little more to spend than Audi's asking here, then Porsche's Panamera provides a really luxurious take on Gran Turismo style motoring from just over £66,000. Other slightly more conventional sporting executive saloons that potential buyers might be looking at for A7 Sportback money include Maserati's Ghibli and top 3-litre versions of the Jaguar XF. If, having considered all this, you conclude it is an A7 you really want, then equipment level shouldn't disappoint. Now, the standard sport model should deliver most of what you really want. There's 19-inch alloy wheels, LED headlamps that automatically dip themselves at night, an acoustically glazed windscreen, the Parking System Plus all-round parking sensor system, LED tail lamps, power folding mirrors, an alarm and a power-operated tailgate with a retractable rear spoiler. There's also a progressive steering setup. Now, that constantly alters the gearing of the steering depending on your inputs. And steering is one of the things that you can influence via the settings of the usual Audi Drive Select system that, as well as allowing you to tweak feel at the helm, will also enable you to vary the throttle response and the gear shift timings to suit the way that you want to drive. Inside, there's the brand's twin-style leather upholstery, and that's with heated front seats seats. They feature electric adjustment and four-way powered lumbar support. Up front, the instrument binnacle features the customizable 12.3-inch Audi virtual cockpit screen, plus there's a rear view camera, there's cruise control, there's an auto-dimming rear view mirror and auto headlamps and wipers. You expect the infotainment technology to be cutting edge in a car of this one's pretensions, and it is. You get Audi's top MMI Navigation Plus with MMI Touch package, but it looks very different to the way that it does on more compact Audi models. This A7 Sportback borrows the layout that we first saw in the 4th generation A8 with its two centre stack screens. There's a 10.1-inch one up top and an 8.6-inch monitor just below it. Now, via the MMI setup, the display up top shows you an intelligent 3D navigation system, and that's able to take into account traffic congestion and previously driven routes. It can brief you on filling stations and parking places on your route, and it includes 3D graphic models of many European cities. The MMI package also includes voice recognition, a DVD player, a 10-speaker 180-watt DAB sound system, and the usual smartphone interface that hooks you up with the Apple CarPlay and Android Auto phone mirroring systems. The Audi Music interface offers simple pairing with your mobile devices using two USB ports with charge and data functions. Plus, the Audi Phone Box package can boost your handset signal, and it includes a wireless charging mat to power it up. An included part of the MMI system is a 3-year subscription to the Audi Connect media connectivity package, and that works via an embedded SIM card that's permanently installed in the car and which operates on a data flat rate, so you won't be stung with high roaming charges if you do a bit of intercontinental motoring. Now, this setup comes with an LTE data transmission module, and that establishes high-speed 4G Internet 3 access and creates in your A8 a Wi-Fi hotspot supporting the new superfast LTE Advanced Mobile Data Network. This also allows you to navigate with images from Google Earth, access a Google Points of Interest search function with voice control, and use a web radio setup with stations from all around the world. Through the Connect system, you can access special in-car versions of your Facebook and your Twitter pages, and it's also possible to read, write, and to send text messages and emails. The included online media streaming package gives access to millions of music tracks, and there's also a clever Audi online traffic information system, and that uses live traffic information to reroute you around jams. Also built into Audi Connect is the Car2X services system that the brand's developed in partnership with Daimler and BMW. Now, that allows this Audi to often, almost magically, respond to future weather or traffic conditions, or to somehow know what's around the next corner. Now, it's not magic, of course. The setup is instead driven by a mobile phone-supported so-called vehicle swarm exchange of information system, and that will see your A7 sending data on driving conditions back to a central hub, which then shares it with other drivers. What else? Well, you can take Audi Connect connectivity with you even when you're not with your A7, and that's thanks to the improved My Audi app. Now, this transmits points of interest to the navigation system, it streams music, and it can transfer your calendar to the MMI infotainment screen. Now, the app also allows you to seamlessly plan a route across multiple devices. So, if you're going to a restaurant in an unfamiliar city, for example, and you have to park a few streets away from the venue, then navigation will continue with you on your smartphone as you complete the journey on foot. Now, finally, as usual with vehicle apps of this sort, you can use it to get vehicle status reports and to lock or unlock the doors from wherever you are. I mean, really, it's motoring in the 21st century. So, is it worth finding the extra cash for more dynamic S-Line spec? Well, we're not sure we would. The S-Line styling pack you get as part of that trim level, with its side skirts, its bespoke front and rear bumpers, and its special rear diffuser, that would be nice to have. So would the leather and Alcantara trimmed front sport seats, the stainless steel pedals, the branded stitched steering wheel, the headlamp washers, and the HD Matrix LED headlights that can react to road conditions and other motorists. We would be a little put off, though, by the fact that S-Line A7 models have to have larger 20-inch wheels and lowered passive sport suspension. Those are both things that firm up the ride quite markedly, and that's to an extent that you may not like. Try before you buy is our advice. We'd be more tempted to buy a sports variant like this one and spend any extra cash on one of the optional adaptive suspension packages. There are two of those. Suspension with damping control electronically alters the shock absorber settings based on your choice of drive select mode. Ideally though, the preferred option would be to stretch to the more sophisticated adaptive air suspension setup, and that's borrowed from the A8, and it really suits this car perfectly. Now this also works through drive select, but more continuously adjusts the damping at all four wheels, and it provides self-leveling suspension with automatically regulating ride height. Now if you can only tick one option box, then let it be that one. Should that be the case, it's probably best not to try a car fitted out with the optional dynamic all-wheel steering, because that's quite tempting too. Now with this setup, the rear wheels are able to turn in the opposite direction to the fronts at parking speeds to considerably improve manoeuvrability, while at over 37 miles an hour, it turns those rear wheels in the same direction as the fronts to improve handling and corner turning. Now if you've chosen a diesel A7, you've added in the dynamic all-wheel steering package, and you've chosen either air suspension or adaptive damping, then you'll also be offered the further opportunity to specify the Quattro with Sport differential package. Now, Audi normally restricts this setup to its most powerful models. The electronic regulation is able to vary torque between the rear wheels for even greater levels of cornering stability and agility. While we're talking technology, let's touch on the cutting-edge autonomous driving options available to A7 Sportback buyers. Now, to get what's known as Level 3 autonomous driving capability, you'll need what Audi calls its traffic jam pilot setup. Now, this will allow the car to drive itself in an unsupervised fashion at speeds of up to 37 miles an hour, so long as you're on a highway with a physical barrier separating both directions of traffic. And it's quite a step forward. Two other optional autonomous features include the parking pilot and the garage pilot systems, and those will allow you to park your A7 without being in the car using a smartphone app. Now, Tesla pioneered such autonomous parking technology, but Audi has refined it and enabled it to undertake far more complex maneuvers. Next, there are various headlight options to consider. Now, we've already mentioned the HD Matrix LED headlamps. They're standard with S-Line spec and optional with this Sport spec level. Now, these incorporate sensors and they work with an inbuilt camera that detects other road users as well as ambient light in built-up areas. The beams then react by dipping individual LEDs to prevent dazzle while still fully illuminating the remainder of the road. Now, they even draw from the vehicle's navigation data to anticipate corners, adjusting the LEDs as you negotiate the bend. On an S-Line model that's already fitted with that Matrix setup, you can further embellish it with an Audi laser light package that complements the LED beam with an even more intense burst of light. So we've so far covered options in four main areas: suspension, handling enhancement, autonomous driving and exterior lights. Beyond that, it's really a case of just picking and choosing between individual niceties and then perhaps signing off with a few aesthetic flourishes. So let's get on to that now. Now, as a starting point in this final leg of specifying your own personal A7 Sportback, you'll probably want the comfort and sound pack, and that packages up four items that you might not want to be without. Now, with this pack, you get a 360-degree camera system and an extended LED interior lighting pack. Now, that adds colour configurable LED strip lighting right around the cabin, so the roof, the armrests, around the seats, even in the door pockets. It really does make the interior feel very special at night. The key comfort and sound pack inclusion, though, is the upgraded Bang & Olufsen premium 3D sound audio setup. That's available with either 16 speakers and 730 watts of sound, or at extra cost with 19 speakers and a thumping 1920 watt output. With or without the Bang & Olufsen package, you can spend more to add in a digital TV and a DVD changer. Other features that A7 customers sometimes choose include a heated windscreen, a head-up display, privacy glass, a park assist system that automatically steers you into spaces, and a night vision assistant that displays a thermal image of the road ahead after dark. You might also want to look at a panoramic glass roof, acoustic side window glazing, a rear screen sunblind and adaptive windscreen wipers with integrated washer jets. On this test car we have powered door closure and 4-zone deluxe air conditioning, so rear seat folk can have their own bespoke climate adjustment. Go for that last feature and you can have heated rear seats too. Plus, your backseat passengers might also appreciate the couple of extra USB ports you can add into the rear. Onto aesthetics. Now, unless you want your A7 painted in solid, brilliant black or ibis white, you're going to need to pay Audi more for a shade from its metallic colour range. We've got Triton Blue here. And of course, there's a selection of alloy wheel designs with 3 different 20-inch aluminium alloy rim options. Inside, if you don't like the standard interior inlays in aluminium provided by the Sport and S-Line trim packages, then you can swap those out for classier fine-grain ash panelling. Now onto seating. You can upgrade all the upholstery to higher quality Milano leather or just concentrate on the front chairs, in which case there are various extra cost sport seat options featuring either super soft Valcona leather or a leather Alcantara trim combination. The full leather pack that we have here would be nice to have, adding as it does fine Napa leather to the upper instrument panel, to the door shoulders, the door armrests and the centre console. And if you can't quite stretch to that, then a cheaper extended leatherette pack will cover those areas in man-made hide instead. We'd also be tempted by the sportier flat bottom steering wheel. Now, a word too about practicalities. We'd want the larger 73-litre fuel tank and the storage pack too. Now that will give you a luggage compartment net, 2 rear 12-volt sockets and a couple of cup holders in the rear central armrest. And the Audi Connect stolen vehicle location system, that's something that we'd certainly like to have. It'll certainly give you peace of mind too. That system triggers in the event of a theft, following which its location can be tracked and then the vehicle can be remotely disabled. Now, you'll even be able to remotely sound the horn and activate the indicators to draw attention to your stolen car if you really want to give that taker a very bad day indeed. Enough with optional features, let's move on to look at safety. Now, before we get into all the electronic stuff, we ought to make the point that this car is fundamentally very safe thanks to its torsionally more rigid body shell and its structural front end. In a head-on collision, 3 stress planes in the nose section absorb the forces. Plus there are ISOFIX child seat mountings, there's a tyre pressure warning light and all the usual front, side and curtain airbags too, with rear side bags available as an option. Should the worst happen and you have a crash that activates those airbags, then a standard Audi Connect safety and service feature will automatically alert the emergency services with your exact GPS location. But of course, the primary purpose of modern safety technology is to avoid an accident in the first place, which is a task of a whole armoury of electronic camera-driven features. Now, over 40 of these have been developed for this generation A7 Sportback, and many of those are standard. As you'd expect in this day and age, there is an autonomous braking system included in that roster. Now, Ingolstadt calls its setup Audi Presense Front, and rather like other similar packages, this one scans the road ahead looking for potential accident hazards as you drive, and it will automatically brake the car to try to avoid those if you don't respond to the warnings. There is also a lane departure warning setup. Now that issues a warning if you drift out of your lane on the highway, and it will also apply subtle steering assistance to ease you back to where you should be. It's always possible to go further though, and should you want extra peace of mind, your Audi Centre salesperson will doubtless point you towards the 2 extra cost safety packs on offer. So let's start with the City Assist pack. That includes 3 main features. Side Assist works as a blind spot monitor, warning you on the move if you're about to dangerously pull out to overtake in the path of another vehicle. Cross Traffic Assist warns of dangerous cross-traffic movements at junctions, and it can, if necessary, automatically apply the brakes and prevent an accident. And Presense Rear warns you via a flashing light if you're about to be hit from behind, so you can try to take avoiding action. It can also warn you of oncoming traffic when you're reversing out of a parking space. The other key optional safety pack you can specify is one we've been trying here, the Tour Pack, and that's also based around camera-driven features, and there are 5 key ones included. Now, arguably the cleverest part of this package is adaptive cruise assist, and that uses a radar sensor, a laser scanner, a front camera and ultrasonic sensors, all networked together to permanently monitor your A7 surroundings. Now, drawing on feedback from these systems, plus local speed restrictions and navigation data, Adaptive Cruise Assist will be able to help you more proactively control acceleration, braking, lane positioning and distance to the vehicle in front, all at any speed and with functionality that's equally effective whether you're stuck in traffic or completely alone on the road. It's really clever. As for the 4 other Tour Pack features, well, there's high beam assist, and that automatically dips the LED headlamps in the face of oncoming traffic. Traffic sign recognition, and that pictures road signs and displays them on the dash. Audi Presense Basic, and that activates if a collision is inevitable, and it'll help you to withstand it by instantly tightening the seat belts, closing any open windows, and also closing the sunroof if you've got one fitted. And finally, as part of that pack, there's also an emergency assist element added to the standard lane departure warning system. Now, that is able to autonomously bring the car to a safe, controlled stop if you don't respond to repeated warnings about drifting out of lane, as might be the case if, for example, you were suddenly taken in at the wheel. It all means that in driving an A7 there are a lot of safety systems to oversee, particularly if you've ticked a few options boxes. So how do you monitor them all? Well, Audi's tried to simplify that process here by providing a driver assist button at the bottom of the centre stack, there to allow the selection of the kind of electronic security blanket that you want. Basic includes only the most important items, Maximum gives you everything, and Individual allows you to pick and choose the features that you want activated. At the lowest driver assist level, Basic, there's that standard Presense front autonomous braking system we mentioned earlier, and the lane departure warning system. That's here embellished with the emergency assist feature because we've got the optional Tour Pack fitted. The top Maximum driver assist setting adds 2 further features: distance warning, which alerts you if you're getting too close to the vehicle in front, and rest recommendation. Now that alerts you if drowsiness is detected in your driving reactions. It's all very reassuring. One of the things that Audi's not quite so keen to talk about with this second generation A7 Sportback is the fact that it's gained around 50 kilos of weight this time around. And that's a pity, because without that, this model would have been able to pretty much match the curb figure of its close Mercedes CLS class rival. Adopt a more glass half full perspective to this issue, and you might prefer to note that this Audi saves 75 kilos, so think in terms of an extra podgy passenger, over the weight of its other key segment rival, the BMW 6 Series GT. Whichever way you look at it though, this Sportback tips the scales at nearly 1.9 tonnes, so you need to manage your expectations in terms of the efficiency figures that you're likely to get. Mindful of that, Audi has equipped all mainstream 6-cylinder A7 engines with MHEV, mild hybrid electric vehicle technology. That's made possible by a belt alternator starter, which is the nerve centre of the clever 48-volt electrical system we first saw on the brand's SQ7 luxury SUV. In highway motoring between 34 and 99 miles an hour, this enables the car to coast for up to 40 seconds with the engine switched off. At slower speeds, it provides for an increased energy recovery output of up to 12 kilowatts, and in traffic it allows for an extended stop-start function that can work at up to 13 miles an hour. Now, Audi claims that the combined impact of all that equates to a saving of 0.7 litres of fuel every 100 kilometres or 62 miles, so it's a worthwhile improvement. Let's look at the WLTP figures, starting with the variant that many will probably choose, the 50 TDI 3-litre diesel sport model that we're trying here. This can manage up to 39.8 mpg on the combined cycle and up to 186 grams per kilometre of CO2. That's a fraction better than you'll get from rival Mercedes CLS 350D and BMW 630D GT X-Drive models, which is good, but the readings that we've just quoted are almost 10% worse than the official figures posted by the equivalent outgoing version of the previous generation model, which is disappointing given all the fuss that Ingolstadt's making about that mild hybrid technology. In response, Audi makes two quite valid points. Firstly, that comparing old and new official figures is misleading because industry stats are now compiled using a much more rigorous WLTP testing procedure. And second, that official stats don't give you a totally real-world efficiency picture. Mid-range economy and cleanliness that the standard readings don't really showcase really ought to be much improved by that MHEV technology. And Audi's own development engineers insist it is. As usual, the figures will slightly vary if you upgrade from the standard 19-inch wheels to the larger 20-inch rims of an S-Line model, or the even bigger 21-inch alloys that sit on the options list. And if you want an A7 and you really care about efficiency stats, then maybe your attention should shift instead to the two 40 series TDI variants that your dealer can tell you about. There's a lower powered V6 and a 2-litre 4-cylinder model. Finally, given that we live in an era of media-fueled diesel scaremongering, we should also cover off the returns for the alternative 55 TFSI petrol derivative. Now, the readings here are, of course, some way down on those of the comparable TDI, but they still manage to look pretty good by class standards. For a Sport 55 TFSI variant on 19-inch wheels, you're talking up to 36.2 mpg on the combined cycle and 176 grams per kilometre of CO2. That's about 10% better than the figures posted by the rival Mercedes CLS 450 and the BMW 640i xDrive models. Whatever your A7 Sportback version of choice, magazine tests have pointed out that across the board, the efficiency figures that we've quoted can be difficult to achieve in day-to-day motoring, but then that's not an issue exclusive to Audi, is it? Much will depend on the driver though, hence Ingolstadt's efforts with this car to help the person at the wheel do more when it comes to frugality. As usual with the company's models, there's an efficiency setting on the Drive Select vehicle dynamic system, and that tweaks the air conditioning, the gear shift timings and the throttle response for maximum frugality. In this particular car, we have some further help in this regard, courtesy of the Efficiency Assist setup, and that comes as part of the Adaptive Cruise Assist system that you get in the optional Tour Pack. Now, Efficiency Assist really is very clever. It constantly gathers navigation data, camera images and feedback from the built-in Car2X message system that receives car swarm feedback from other similarly equipped vehicles. Using all this, the software can then contribute to a more economical driving style, for example, instructing you when to release the accelerator before entering a curve or behind a slower vehicle, for instance. Get out onto the highway, and with the adaptive cruise control system activated, Efficiency Assist will automatically make all the frugal driving adjustments for you. So if it knows you're going to be traveling for a few junctions, it'll even use the coasting function that we mentioned to disengage the engine at cruising speeds for greater efficiency. In fact, if desired, the system can even automatically regulate acceleration and deceleration. What else? Well, bear in mind that all versions of this car will be subject to the government's tax levy for models costing over £40,000. That stands at £450 a year for the first 5 years of ownership. And of course, as with all modern diesel cars, the TDI versions of this one use an AdBlue fuel additive, and that's stored in a separate rear tank that'll need to be topped up as part of regular servicing. Talking of maintenance, servicing your A7 Sportback should be no more taxing than is the case with one of the company's smaller cars. As usual with Audi models, there is a choice of either a fixed or a flexible servicing regime, and the choice between the two depends on the extent of your likely annual mileage. Now, the fixed schedule is aimed at drivers covering fewer than 10,000 miles a year, and it includes an oil change every 9,000 miles or every year, plus an inspection service every 19,000 miles or every 2 years. If, on the other hand, you cover more than 10,000 miles a year, the flexible service schedule will be more appropriate. This regime includes oil change and inspection services at variable intervals of up to every 19,000 miles or every 2 years. Whatever package you go for, you'll need to change the brake fluid after the first 3 years and then every 2 years thereafter. Overall, maintenance costs can be kept down if you go for one of the prepaid servicing plans that you'll be offered at initial purchase, and those can cover you for up to a maximum of 5 years and 90,000 miles. You may be interested to know that this car can even book its own safety appointments via an Audi Connect safety and service system app. So as well as providing emergency calling and online roadside assistance, that feature can, at the appropriate time, send a service request direct to your local dealer. Alternatively, you could instead sign up for Audi Service Request, and that uses the onboard Wi-Fi to enable your car to communicate with the dealer. As your A7 nears a time when work will be needed, the diagnostics alert your nominated local Audi centre, who will then contact you to book in a convenient time. And another neat service that your dealer can offer you is the so-called Audi Cam system. Now here, technicians carrying out workshop inspections on your Sportback can focus a handheld Audi Cam camera on specific problems and accompany the image with verbal diagnosis to create footage that can be sent to your PC or to your smartphone. Now this way you'll always know precisely what work you're authorising on your car. On to residuals. Well, you don't expect a large luxury contender of this kind, even one with a distinguished premium badge, to provide rock-solid residuals. Still, this second-generation A7 Sportback still manages to lead its class in this regard, predicting in 50 TDI diesel form to return 37.9% of its original value after the usual industry standard 3-year, 60,000-mile ownership period. And that's according at least to industry specialist CAP. That's a fraction ahead of the two Mercedes and BMW rivals we mentioned earlier. For an A7 Sportback 55 TFSI, the residual figure is 40%. Again, that's a fraction ahead of the opposition. And it's a similar story when it comes to pence per mile running costs. Experts CAP reckon that over 3 years and 60,000 miles, an A7 Sportback 50 TDI would cost 71.16 pence per mile to run, which is about the same as the equivalent Merc and BMW models. A petrol 55 TFSI model would cost 72.36 pence per mile to operate. That's about the same as a rival Mercedes CLS 450, but it's about 3 pence per mile better than the equivalent rival BMW 6 Series GT 640i xDrive. Let's finish by covering the warranty. Now, all cars in this class get 3 years of cover, but whereas BMW and Mercedes don't limit your mileage in that period, Audi rather meanly restricts you to 60,000 miles. Optional extra cost packages can extend that cover to either 4 or 5 years though. As for insurance groupings, well, they'll be very comparable to those of other premium brands in this segment. All versions of the 55 TFSI petrol model are rated at Group 44E. For all versions of this 50 TDI variant, it's Group 45E. Every part of this car has been designed with a thoroughness that's deeply impressive, if sometimes rather clinical. Of course, the end result is hardly inexpensive, and you'll need to spend plenty on options to get the complete driving experience it's able to offer. Still, if that's not an issue, then you could well find the A7 very desirable indeed. This car is perhaps the definitive expression of how Audi wants you to perceive its brand. Whether you'd ever bond with it, really, is another question. You might find an upmarket vodka bar smart, sophisticated, beautifully appointed, but a little clinical and impersonal. And some may feel that way about an A7, both in terms of its driving demeanour and its cabin design. For others, the whole measured, refined and powerfully efficient Sportback travelling experience will be effortlessly cool in a way that no class rival can quite match. It all comes down to the kind of car you expect this to be. We are certainly in no doubt that this is the kind of car Audi should be making. The brand built its reputation on technology and then fell back on stylistic design and cool marketing to sell its products. This second-generation A7 Sportback is a further sign of a welcome change of direction, a reversion back to the company's core principles, offering things you simply can't get elsewhere. If it feels more advanced than its rivals from behind the wheel, that's because it is. Now, for sure, segment competitors will quickly match this car's potential for level 3 autonomous driving technology, but by then, Ingolstadt will no doubt have raised the bar once more. And in summary, well, it's certainly true that you've still really got to like Audis to like this car. More specifically, you've got to like A7s. For all this Mark II model's sophistication, it still feels very much an evolution of the original first generation design. As a result, there are always going to be those who'll prefer the elegance of a Mercedes CLS or the slightly more dynamic demeanour of a BMW 6 Series GT. We're guessing, though, that a small but significant number of executive segment buyers might now find this Audi to be a surprisingly complete all-round choice, were they ever minded to consider one. It's very Vorsprung durch Technik, just as it should be. Let's look at the WLTP figures, starting with the variant that many will probably choose, the 50 TDI 3-litre diesel sport model that we're trying here. This can manage up to 39.8 mpg on the combined cycle and up to 186 grams per kilometre of CO2.